I've made videos before about the Enoch Burke case, and very often I have started the video with saying this is an excoriating judgment from whatever judge in the High Court. Well, the judgment yesterday takes the biscuit. It wins the prize, because this was an excoriating judgment from Mr. Justice Brian Cregan in the High Court. The judge essentially said that Enoch Burke has something to hide over his income, and he made a number of other statements, a number of other assertions with which I'm sure Mr. Burke and his family won't be happy. But this was a judgment of criticism, the likes of which I haven't seen in a civil case, I don't believe, before. That's not to say now that the criticism was unjustified, but I am saying that Mr. Justice Brian Cregan yesterday pulled no punches. And he made himself absolutely clear as to where he stands in relation to Enoch Burke and Enoch Burke's incarceration in Mountjoy, and what his attitude might be in relation to getting out for Christmas or that sort of thing. I don't think it's on the cards, quite frankly. Anyway, the High Court judge, Mr. Justice Brian Cregan, he said that Enoch Burke and his family could be using this court case to make money, and that it was clear Mr. Burke had, quote, something to hide about his income. The judge made the comment while refusing an application by Mr. Burke to amend some of the language he used in a recent judgment ordering him to be sent back to Mountjoy Prison. So when the judge made a decision there last week, or the week before, to send Enoch Burke back to Mountjoy Prison, he made a number of statements that Enoch Burke was a malign figure stalking the corridors of Wilson's Hospital School, and that other certainly very critical descriptions. And Enoch Burke took exception to that and asked the judge to change that or amend his judgment in that regard, insofar as Enoch Burke said that the statements were actually defamatory and a character assassination and so on. Not only did the judge not change the words, he actually doubled down on them yesterday. In his latest ruling, that's yesterday, the judge again strongly criticised Enoch Burke, saying he was telling lies and trying to inhabit a reality of his own, where his lies are the truth and everything everyone else says is lies. He said that Burke was using the courts to pursue a political campaign against transgenderism, and that was an abuse of process. Last week, Enoch Burke made an application to the High Court for a number of changes to the judgment delivered by Mr. Justice Brian Cregan in November. The judge in his ruling ordered that Mr. Burke should be committed to prison for a fourth time for his continued breach of a court order by trespassing at Wilson's Hospital School, where he formerly worked. Remember, he was dismissed in January 2023, effective April 2023. Mr. Burke was suspended and subsequently dismissed from the school. However, he's still being paid by the Department of Education pending the outcome of his appeal against his dismissal. Before his imprisonment, he attended the school when it was open, saying he had a right to attend at his place of work. The dismissal appeal, incidentally, is supposed to take place on the 13th of December. I think that's this Saturday, so that remains to be seen. Mr. Burke continued to attend the school despite the imposition of fines totalling more than €200,000 and the school's employment of security guards to keep him out. Mr. Burke complained about the judge's description of him as baleful and malign in the ruling, and about the judge's use of the words roaming and stalking when describing his behaviour at the school. The judge said he had at first considered whether he should even entertain Mr. Burke's application to amend the judgment. He said Mr. Burke seemed to think that he could come to court on a regular basis and seek relief from the courts, while at the same time refusing to obey court orders. The judge said that this was entirely unacceptable, but he had decided to consider the application. That's an important point. The judge has decided to consider this application to amend his judgment, because Enoch Burke wasn't happy with the description of him as being a malign and baleful character stalking and roaming the school. Do you think if Enoch Burke was from Ballymun or Finglas or Poppintree or Clondalkin or a socially deprived area of Limerick or Cork, do you think that a judge would be entertaining an application by somebody in those circumstances from those areas to amend their judgment because they didn't like the description? Anyway, the judge in this case said that this was entirely unacceptable, but he had decided to consider the application. So the judge, not only did he not change his description of Mr. Burke, but he actually doubled down on it. He said Mr. Burke's first objection was to the judge's use of the word baleful to describe him. Mr. Burke said this word meant threatening harm. Judge Cregan said that Mr. Burke had obtained this meaning from, quote, some sort of Google search which gave only one meaning of the word. However, the judge said the authoritative source for the meaning of words was the 20-volume Oxford English Dictionary, which had numerous definitions of the word. Again, this is a very interesting departure. I've never seen anybody going to these lengths before, a judge going to these lengths before to actually explain a judgment that they previously made, especially when it comes to the definition of words and so on, and the use of sources and the provenance of words, and the judge's reliance on the Oxford English Dictionary. Among the definitions of baleful, the judge said, was, quote, full of malign, deadly or noxious influence, pernicious, destructive, noxious, injurious, mischievous, malignant. Judge Cregan said that it was clear that Mr. Burke's presence at the school from the point of view of pupils and teachers and viewed objectively was, quote, pernicious, destructive, injurious and malignant. He said that Mr. Burke's definition of the word was threatening harm, was not in the Oxford English Dictionary, but he said even if it was, this definition was also applicable to Mr. Burke, whose daily trespassing, he said, caused harm to the school. So here's the judge, not only not changing his judgment previously or his description of Mr. Burke's behaviour, but actually doubling down on it. The judge said Mr. Burke had again relied on an inadequate Google search for his definition of the word malign. He said there was no doubt Mr. Burke bore a grudge and had ill will towards the school. He said there was also no doubt Mr. Burke was, quote, plotting and contriving against the school and was fully aware the school didn't want him there. The judge said he had chosen the words baleful and malign carefully. He said they seemed to be entirely apposite and he would not be removing them. The judge, Mr. Justice Cregan, said he had also stood over his use of the word roaming to describe Mr. Burke wandering unlawfully through the corridors of the school. He said Mr. Burke's objection to the use of the word stalking was entirely without merit. He said Mr. Burke's objection was based on the definition of stalking as a criminal offence. The judge said the word had been in use for hundreds of years before the 2023 legislation dealing with stalking, and that was the context in which he used it. The judge said it was clear he had used the word figuratively to capture the essence of the troubling spirit which is Mr. Burke's presence in the school. His daily trespassing into the heart of the school clearly caused anxiety and apprehension among pupils and teachers, the judge said. The judge said he stood by his finding that Mr. Burke was a potential danger to pupils and teachers of the school. He said Mr. Burke's argument that he had treated all members of the school community with courtesy and respect was nonsense, and he had treated them with the greatest or the grossest disrespect. The judge said that he did not intend to add a paragraph to his judgment, quoting the principal who said he had never seen Mr. Burke engage in physical violence. The judge said that that was the very least one would expect from a teacher. Strategy of confrontation. The judge said that Mr. Burke had claimed his character had been assassinated. But the judge said from a review of his own actions and words, Mr. Burke was a teacher who verbally berates a bishop during a religious service, who berates the principal after the school service in front of pupils, teachers and parents, who was dismissed for gross misconduct, who trespasses upon school property, who breaches court orders and would rather the school pay for security guards rather than spend the money on its own pupils. The judge continued that Mr. Burke was a man who preferred a strategy of confrontation rather than one of dialogue and compromise, who exhibited an abnormal degree of verbal aggression and disrespect, who lacked insight into the inappropriateness of his behaviour, who verbally abuses all judges before whom he appears, who lies in sworn documents, who lies to security guards and lies on every social media post about the reasons why he is in prison. That, I think you'll have to agree, is fairly strong stuff. The judge said that Burke had assassinated his own character by his own deeds and words. Judge Cregan said Mr. Burke could be released at any time if he purged his contempt by agreeing not to trespass on school property. However, the judge said he would not be released for Christmas, as he had been previously. He said the school should not have to await with fear and trepidation over the Christmas holidays to see if Mr. Burke intended to trespass again on the first day of the new school term. However, the judge said the idea that Mr. Burke was to be imprisoned for life was, quote, nonsense. He said if the underlying dispute between the school and Mr. Burke came to an end, Mr. Burke could be released. If he was reinstated to his position at the school by the disciplinary appeals panel, then he would cease to be a trespasser. On the other hand, the judge said if his dismissal was upheld by the appeals panel, then Mr. Burke's self-created legal fiction that he can turn up for work every day because he's still employed by the school would, the judge hoped, come to an end. The judge said it was vital that the disciplinary appeals panel should make its decision as quickly as possible to try to bring the dispute to an end. The judge said the amount of lies being told by Mr. Burke was one of the most disturbing aspects of the case. He said Mr. Burke was in breach of a valid court order not to trespass at the school. It was for the courts to set out why someone was in prison. The judge said it was not open to Mr. Burke to pretend he was in prison for a different reason. He said Mr. Burke said repeatedly that he was in prison because of his opposition to transgender rights. The judge said he knew these statements were lies, yet he continued to make them. He said Mr. Burke seemed to be trying to inhabit a reality of his own where words mean what he says they mean, where his lies are the truth and everything everyone else says was lies. The judge said the court was concerned with the objective truth of the situation. The judge said that there may well be good arguments why teachers should not be compelled to call pupils by they, them pronouns, and he said there may be good reasons why they should. He said the case raised important questions about freedom of religion and freedom of speech. But he said in order that impartial courts could consider these clashes of constitutional rights, the rule of law had to be maintained and court orders had to be obeyed. He said Mr. Burke could protest every single day outside the gates of the school, not inside them. The judge said the case was exceptional because Mr. Burke had made a calculation that it, quote, brought him notoriety and his 15 minutes of fame. He also said it could be that Mr. Burke and his family wished to make money from the campaign. The judge said Mr. Burke's refusal to comply with court orders to furnish details of his income and expenditure made it clear, quote, he had something to hide in this regard. He accused Mr. Burke of not being concerned with the truth or the rule of law. The judge said the more the case had gone on, the more he had come to realise that Mr. Burke was not interested in defending the legal case taken by the school against him at all. He said Mr. Burke and his family had sought to disrupt and undermine every hearing they had intended and engaged in verbal abuse of whatever judge was hearing the application. The judge said Mr. Burke had refused repeatedly to accept court rulings and he and members of his family had been dragged, quote, kicking and screaming from the Court of Appeal. The judge said Mr. Burke was using the courts to pursue his political campaign against transgenderism. The courts were not the appropriate place to do this, the judge said, and his conduct of the case was an abuse of process. The judge repeated that to be released, Mr. Burke does not have to give any undertaking to call a child they or them or to accept transgenderism. He simply had to agree not to trespass on the school's property. That's worth saying again. The judge repeated that to be released, Enoch Burke simply had to agree not to trespass on Wilson's Hospital school property. Before the judge delivered his judgment, Enoch Burke's mother, Martina, brother Isaac and sister Amy were removed from court by Gardaí after refusing to leave when requested to do so by the judge. And the judge, I know from reading it in another publication online there, the reason for that was because of their activity and their behaviour and the way they conducted themselves in previous court hearings in the High Court and the Court of Appeal. So even though they may well protest that they have a constitutional right to be there, the judge also has a right to manage his court in a way that he sees fit. And this judge on this occasion decided that they were going to be removed by the Gardaí because of their behaviour at previous court hearings. This reporting is from Orla O'Donnell in the RTE. That's the latest in the Enoch Burke case. And as I say, I haven't seen a judgment like that in a civil case for quite some time. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever seen one. And obviously the judge is essentially accusing Enoch Burke of A, making money from this whole racket, and B, repeatedly and consistently lying and telling lies, both online and elsewhere. Anyway, that's what the judge has to say, Mr. Justice Brian Cregan, and that's the latest from the Enoch Burke situation. And as it happens, it's in again, this case, next week, next Wednesday, in the High Court. Hope you find the video useful. If you do, hit the thumbs up button down below. Some people have criticised me for not giving my opinion about these cases, and other people have praised me for not giving my opinion about these cases, in other words, reporting them. I have a decision to make. Do I just report the case, or do I report the case and comment, or do I just comment? Up to now, I have maintained a position of just reporting the case, etc., etc., although anybody who's reading between the lines can probably figure out exactly where I lie in relation to the thing. But I'd be interested to hear your view down below as to whether I should continue just reporting the case and what happens in court in an objective way, or should I actually, would you prefer that I did a commentary, in other words, give my opinion, etc. on it? I'm in two minds one way or the other, because as I say, I have had people thanking me for my coverage and that it's not subjective or biased or leaning one way or the other, but other people have criticised me for not actually expressing my opinion. I'd be interested to hear your comments down below. Hit the thumbs up button anyway, and subscribe to my channel, because I'm trying to get to 50,000 followers and I am at 48,000 now. All of the videos that I put up are completely free. Thanks a lot.